Welcome, everyone, to another webinar of the Well-Educated Heart webinar series. My name's Trent Merrill. I'll be teaching one of the classes this year. My class is titled Innovators, Inventors, and Heroes. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the second half of this webinar. But the first half of the webinar, I wanted to offer something that, maybe it's something that you're already doing. But I wanted to offer something that was useful to everyone, not just those interested in my course. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint presentation to help guide us through this discussion. But tonight I wanted to talk about implementing an innovator's mindset in our homeschool classrooms. Talk a little bit about what an innovator's mindset is. I'm a patent attorney by trade. And so I meet with inventors and innovators all the time. And so I'll share some of the tips and tricks that they have offered or that I have witnessed them using. And I think it really applies to the homeschool classroom as well. It's really important that we teach our children how to solve problems and how to learn from failure. And I think, honestly, the best way for them to learn that is by us modeling it for them. We're not perfect. We encounter problems all the time, especially as homeschool parents, right? I mean, every year it seems like, what curriculum are we teaching? What can I do for this boy or this girl or what? I mean, we're always encountering these problems. And so you're probably doing a lot of these things that I'm going to teach. Hopefully, I'll give you a little bit of confidence in the things that you're doing. Hopefully, that inner voice will speak to you as we discuss some of these things, and maybe it will inspire you to do something in your own homeschool classroom that might make it better. And maybe it won't, and that's fine too. We're always learning, always advancing, always trying to improve. A little bit about me. My name, like I said, is Trent Merrill. I'm a homeschool dad, father of 5 kids, keeper of a golden retriever, chickens, thousands of bees. We've been homeschooling our kids for over 10 years now. I've taught classes in our local co-op, which is fun. I enjoy training, I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy being taught. I have 12 years of experience as a patent attorney. I've had a lot of really cool clients. I've worked for really neat companies that do fun things. And so it's exciting for me, and I'm excited to share this with the students of our class too. I've been a guest lecturer at a few different schools. I like going to school. I like learning. And so I have a degree in science. I have a degree in computer engineering. I have a couple of law degrees, and for fun, I'm slowly working towards an MBA degree too. But true to well-educated heart technique, we're going to start off my presentation, or at least move toward kind of a story time. I want you to meet Al. This is Al looking at this picture. Al was a handsome fellow growing up, as we see from the picture. And he was in public school. He lived sort of in the wilderness at that time. It was in Port Huron, Michigan. But even though he lived sort of in the wilderness, kids went to public school. And at school, he did not do very well. One of the teachers described him as being a little addled, which means he was confused, unable to think clearly, sort of jumbled all the time, just out there. His father reportedly thought he was stupid. And then one time, little Al, went into the barn and lit a few things on fire. And the fire got away from him so quickly, he was barely able to get out of the fire himself, and the whole barn burned down. And when his father asked him, "Why did you do this?" his response was, "I just wanted to see what would happen." And so, as you can imagine, that would be frustrating as a father because, I mean, didn't he know what was going to happen if he lit a fire inside of the barn with all of these flammable materials? But that was Al for you. One time, He was leaving his mother's kitchen. He grabbed a few biscuits and some bacon, or maybe it was ham, and he went out to the chicken coop. And his goose, who he famously had a pet goose that he adored, his goose was sitting on eggs, and he couldn't wait for the eggs to hatch. And he thought that his goose must have had a problem because she had been sitting on these eggs for so long and they hadn't hatched yet. And so he moved the goose off the eggs and he sat down on the eggs himself, thinking that his body heat would be better for those eggs and that they would hatch under his care. He got through all of his food. His mother was calling him at dinner time, and she came and found him in the chicken coop sitting on these goose eggs, and he was hungry. And so he left his post and went to eat dinner with his mom. And I guess the goose probably resumed sitting on the eggs. But again, in school, he said he always sat at the foot of the classroom, and he used to feel that the teachers didn't sympathize with him. In fact, one of his teachers told his parents that they should just keep him in the streets, that he would never make a scholar. And so this little Al had a lot of different things going on. I mean, there was one time he was ice skating, and there were signs, I guess, that said don't skate close to this edge because it was thin ice, and he wanted to see how close he could get to that edge. Ended up falling in and almost drowning in the ice. Just curious guy, curious little boy. And so because he was having issues in school, I think some of us can relate to this in one way or another. Al's mother took him out of public school and began reading classics to him. Well-educated heart, that sounds familiar. She encouraged experimental learning, learning by doing, learning by trying, learning by just figuring things out. And as part of that, she gave him a book called The School Compendium of Natural and Experimental Philosophy. And what this book actually is a bunch of different experiments. It will describe a technology, give an example of how you could make sort of a basic model of the technology. And Al loved this book. And he loved it so much. One of the chapters talked about Samuel Morse's telegraph. And he actually got the materials and made a homemade telegraph that went from his house to a friend's house. And so they started sending telegraph messages to each other with homemade batteries that they had made. And so he and his friend could talk back and forth over the telegraph. And this Al, so his mother's love and devotion really changed the direction of his life. He was going down a path where no one had confidence in him. No one was giving him the time of day. They were sitting him in the back of the classroom, telling him he belonged somewhere else. But his mother loved him and helped him, with his way of learning. He said, "My mother was the making of me. She was so true, so sure of me, and I felt I had someone to live for, someone I must not disappoint." And maybe some of you already know who Al is. That's what he went by as a youth. But when he became older, we know him as Thomas Alva Edison. And so this boy who had so much trouble in public school, whose father thought he might be stupid, went on to become who's widely considered the best inventor ever. He's definitely the father of modern innovation, of working on a product, trying to solve problems and finding the best solution for these common problems. He has so many patents. His incandescent light bulb has 389 telegraph inventions, a motorized pen for stenciling copies. So one of the first copy machines. Telephone transmitter, a phonograph. He's the first to record speech. So many things that he did because of the direction his mom sent him on, changed the course of his life. And we'll return to Thomas Edison's life a little bit. We're definitely going to talk about him in the Innovators, Inventors, and Heroes course on a couple of different topics that we'll discuss. But we'll return to that. So why is innovation important in our classrooms? I was interested to learn that in 2011, there was a study that showed that after 2 years of college, nearly half of all students were no more skillful than when they began their studies. And then fully one third showed no gains after 4 years. So students could go to college for 4 years, and a third of them would graduate with a degree without having gained any true skills. And I have some of my own personal theories on why that would be the case. It seemed like when I was going through school, and I guess still go through school, there are a lot of people who learn to take the test or learn to game the system. They learn how to just get by in classes, and that can be damaging. Just knowing how to take a test is important for sure, but just knowing how to game schooling and game the system is showing that one third of the people who go to college have no gains after 4 years, and that's a problem. So we need students that think critically, think creatively, ask questions, communicate effectively, and solve problems. Not just students who will score well on a test, though taking tests is important. We all need those to get into schools and take the ACT and do well in college so that we can be set out on the career path that we want. But it's important for us to think critically, think creatively, ask questions, communicate effectively. And so in our homeschool classrooms, we can be doing things that help encourage those things. We can help model that by thinking critically and creatively. We can encourage our students to ask us questions, to ask questions about why are we doing it this way, or what can we do better, and trying those things out. But it's difficult. So how do we do that? The answer can be quite simple in theory. I mean, it's easy to look at a triangle and say, yeah, just do these three things. That's it. And you'll solve all of your problems. So it's easy to say that, hard to put into practice. But this triangle that I'm showing you here on this slide is something that inventors that I work with all the time use all the time. Well, most of it anyway. There's one step that they might be doing, but I'm not involved in that part of it. And this triangle I actually took, so I was taking a course with my church. It's called an emotional resilience course. And this was how the church was teaching in this manual how to solve problems. And this is how inventors solve problems. So step number one, identify what the real problem is. Maybe the problem is so and so. So we'll say Johnny doesn't do math. Johnny dislikes math. So that's the problem. Or what is the problem? Something deeper? Does he not understand something? Is it hard? And so he just doesn't like the discomfort, or are there mental blocks or things like that? So what is the real problem? How can we get to the bottom of it? Step number two is study out the options. What are possible solutions? Which is the best one? Johnny doesn't like math, but he loves to code or loves to program computers. So what are the possible solutions? Maybe we could have Johnny program a calculator. And by programming a calculator, doing something that he loves to do, maybe the math will come along with it. At our house, we had a son. We still have the son, but his problems with math are no longer. We took a year off of math and let him read Life of Fred. And then when he returned to math a year later, a lot of the concepts that he had read in Life of Fred were more familiar with him. And so the math came along a little bit easier. And now he's down the path of mathematics, doing math without a lot of the mental blocks and the stress that he was experiencing before. So identify the real problem. What are the solutions? What are the best solutions of those solutions? Thinking critically, thinking creatively, asking questions. And then number three, pray for guidance. I am a man of faith. I think that this is an important part of it. The inventors I work with, maybe they're praying to, I don't know. We don't really talk about that at work. but I think that that's something that we can do as we counsel with God of how we can help our children in the classrooms, how we can help them excel. And so these are things. I worked with a company called Atheno. They're one of the most innovative companies in the world. They win, or they're given awards for being one of the most innovative companies in the world. And they, in their meetings, when they're talking about their new inventions, the process that they go through as they're disclosing their invention to the rest of the team is, here's the problem. This communication is happening and it's clunky, it's not efficient, and it's using too much of a phone's battery. So they deal with 5G communication. And because of this problem in the type way that they're doing it, it's causing these issues. And here is a proposed solution for it. And then they start working together on honing and crafting and fine tuning that solution to the problem that they've identified. And that's just this one big round that they're constantly going on. They're going step 1, 2, maybe 3, then back to 1 and 2. And they're winning awards for being one of the most innovative companies. And that it's really that easy, but hard, but easy. And so when we're identifying the real problem and thinking of these solutions, we need to harness our inner Nancy Elliott Edison, Thomas Edison's mother. You know, and you love your students better and more than anybody else in the whole world. And so intuitively, as a mother or father or guardian, you know what's best for them, even if that solution might be unconventional. And I think as homeschool parents, we probably know this and are aware of this, maybe more than others. We are already sort of going down this path of unconventionality. And so maybe we're not afraid to try something unconventional, but we need to harness our Nancy Edison so that we can help our owls find their footing, find the way that they learn, and help them learn and grow and solve their problems. We can try something new and hopefully something better. Write it out. What is the problem? Be specific. That's what, we're still talking in that step 1. What is the problem? Come up with specific solutions. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Be creative. Think big. Or maybe think simple. Or maybe by thinking simple, it is thinking big. Just come up with ideas. Like I was saying, if someone is struggling with one topic, but they like computer programming, maybe you could have them program something on the topic that they are struggling with. Or if they're an artist, Dr. Pablo in his geometry class, I think it's geometry class, when they're going through Euclid's Elements, they do a lot of drawing. And so you start visualizing the problem and visualizing the solution. And so maybe someone who's an artist can use their art to learn science or to learn these different topics. So you can be as creative as you want. Just find that specific problem, write it out, write out what the solutions might be, and involve your kids in these decisions. That's one of the best things that we could offer them as we work through these issues, as we work through the problems, showing them and modeling them what we're doing, how we're analyzing the problem, how we're thinking critically and creatively, how we're thinking outside of the box. And, maybe we do all of these things and it just doesn't work out. And that's okay. But by guiding them, mentoring them, and letting them fail, or even failing on our own and showing them it's okay, that's part of the process. We're not perfect. We'll be modeling this behavior that will help them for the rest of their life. I've worked with people who have always been the smartest person in the room. In school, they were the smartest. Around their friends, they're the smartest. And then they get into a law firm atmosphere, or they're working with other inventors, and they start receiving poor feedback, or they start receiving criticisms. of things that could be done better, and a lot of them fold because they're not used to being challenged. They're not used to not having the perfect answer all the time. And so I think it's important for us to help build that character and showing it's okay. We can try these new things out. We can be creative. We can think big. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. It didn't always work out for Thomas Edison. There are some famous quotes that I'll get to here in just a second, but Thomas Edison said, when you have exhausted all possibilities, remember this, you haven't. There are more possibilities. There are other things that we can try. And by implementing this innovator's mindset or this inventor's mindset in our classrooms, we'll be modeling these things for our kids so that as they encounter problems in their lives, as they encounter criticism, as they try something at work and it doesn't work out, they'll be fine. They'll rebound. They'll find something better. They'll learn from it and they'll keep moving on. It's important to remember that failure is not final. Not only is it important for us to know that, I know that my wife and I, as we've figured out different curriculums, as we've put together schedules, as we've done this and done that, it doesn't always work out, and that's fine. It's not final. We can move on. We can do something different. We can change directions. We can pivot. And in fact, Thomas Edison was working with his assistant as they were coming up with his incandescent light bulb. So the way an incandescent light bulb works is you have two electrodes. The power comes up this electrode, and it needs to get to the other electrode to complete the circuit. And they had filaments. So a different material that as the electricity crossed that path from this pole to this pole, it would illuminate and brighten the room. And so a lot of the filaments that they were working with would glow really bright for seconds and then gone. And then they would work with one, maybe it would go for 20 seconds and then the filament would be gone. And so they had to keep coming up with different filaments, and the assistant was getting frustrated. And out of frustration, he said, all of our work is in vain. We've learned nothing. And Thomas Edison, his response is very wise, and it's sort of famous. He said, oh, we've come a long way and we have learned a lot. We now know that there are 2,000 elements which we cannot use to make a good light bulb. So instead of focusing on the negative, he was focusing on, okay, so it hasn't worked 2,000 times. Maybe it will be the 2001st time or the 2002nd. And it's interesting from his life. There was someone that was sort of his contemporary that was also a brilliant man, Nikola Tesla, that we'll talk about in our class. Nikola Tesla had a laboratory that burned down. And it was so devastating for Tesla that for months, maybe even years, he was in this state of depression where he was inconsolable. People couldn't talk to him. He just could not move on with his life because he had lost everything. A brilliant man, and we'll learn about some of the wonderful things he did. But if you look at Thomas Edison, who also had a lab that burned down accidentally, he had so many chemicals in his lab that when the lab was on fire, the chemicals were making flames that were different colors. Not quite like fireworks, but a green flame, and then something purple would come up. And he had his sons. He told one of his sons to go get his mom, and they watched in awe and fascination of, this is something that we'll never see again in our life. All of these chemicals burning and the cool things that it was doing in the sky. And so there are things that we can learn even when our labs are on fire. We can still see the beauty of it, like Thomas Edison. So in our classrooms, as we're doing things and as we're frustrated and it's not working out, we can still learn from it, pivot, and move on. A reporter even asked Thomas Edison, how did it feel to fail 1,000 times? He said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps. So we can look at the positive things. Not everything is going to be cupcakes and rainbows and happiness all the time, but as we're working on improving, making these incremental improvements in our homeschool classrooms, if we involve our kids and model how to think critically, creatively, out of the box. As we model those things, we will teach our kids how to become problem solvers, how to be resilient, how to look for the successes and the learning opportunities in the failures, so that as we go throughout our life, we can constantly be evolving, constantly be learning, getting smarter, and just becoming better problem solvers. As I mentioned, I am a man of faith, and there's a leader of my church who's pretty prominent named Dieter Uchtdorf, and he gave a talk to our church a while back, actually it was last April. And he said, sometimes we wonder if someone else might be better qualified to guide and teach our children. But no matter how inadequate you may feel, you have something that uniquely qualifies you, your love for your child. A parent's love for a child is one that is strong, is one of the strongest forces in the universe. It's one of the few things on this earth that can truly be eternal. Patiently allow the rising generation to make inspired choices and let God work his miracle. The result will be more beautiful and more stunning and more joyful than anything you could accomplish by yourself. I think some of the things that I've talked about today, that triangle of studying out what the problems are, coming up with possible solutions, praying about them, and then implementing them and trying to learn and be involved in that. As parents, we are entitled to receive inspiration for our children. Intuitively, we know what's best for them. I hope that we can be a little bit more courageous, that we can work with God to help our kids find the solutions to the problems that we encounter in our homeschool classrooms. This method is something that inventors are doing to work on 5G. They're coming up with new computer programs to help healthcare systems. I'm writing patents constantly and working with inventors all the time who are doing the same sort of circle of what's the problem? How can I fix it? If it doesn't work out, what's a better fix? And we can be doing that in our homeschool classrooms. And as we do so, we can teach our kids to be problem solvers. Just like Thomas Edison, just like Thomas Edison's mother, we can be on that same path. I know Daniel, before we started teaching, before we started recording, was talking about how he wants to invent things. And I think it's such a wonderful thing that we can develop and encourage and help promote in our children to find solutions to the problems of our everyday lives. And so I hope that I was able to offer something. Hopefully it's encouragement. Hope maybe it's even just a celebration. Hurrah, we're doing this. Another school year is about to start. I've been doing all these things. It's going to be a great year. And so as homeschool parents, it's sometimes nice to pat ourselves on the back for all the hard work that we're doing to help raise and develop our kids, and try to not ruin things. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time now talking about the Innovators, Inventors, and Heroes course, and what we will be doing in the course. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment and switch to a different view. So the overall theme of the course is I hope to learn from these historical inventors and innovators as we learn about the problems that they encountered, and as we study the solutions for those problems, that we can sort of come up with a thought process and understand and be inspired mainly of the steps that they took, the dedication and the sacrifices they made to come up with these creative solutions to problems that everyone encounters every day. And by learning from them, start implementing some of those problem solving techniques in our own lives. And so the way that the class is arranged, we meet once a week, as you know, and we meet for 1 hour. And during that hour, we'll be discussing the homework that was assigned the previous week. And so, for example, in week 1, I've already uploaded and provided this introduction video. So this is where the students will start. They click here, and this is showing my view, but your view will be a little bit similar, not that unlike my view. And so you can see this video that will introduce the topics of week 1. And then there's a book, problem solution technique. We'll read portions of a book. We'll read it. We'll watch a few YouTube clips about a company or an organization that's very near and dear to my heart called World Bicycle Relief. And then we'll listen to 2 podcasts, one talking about a company called Cotopaxi and the other about Tom's. And so each week we'll have a theme, and each week we'll have homework. And so during the week, students will be expected to complete their homework so that when they arrive to class on week 1 or week 2, they will be ready to discuss for that hour the things that we have learned during the previous week. So when the students show up on week 1, we'll be talking about the problem solution technique. We'll be talking about, there are some prompts for different questions to answer about World Bicycle Relief. And then we'll discuss how Cotopaxi and Tom's were invented, or were companies that were founded with purpose, and what they're doing to improve the lives of people around them. As inventors, I believe inventors and innovators have a responsibility. I mean, they'll make their money, and that's wonderful, but I think it's important for us to remember that we've been given these powerful gifts of invention and creation to help improve the lives of those around us. And I think these are wonderful examples of that. And so anyway, when we arrive to class each week, we will have completed the homework. We'll be ready to discuss the homework for that hour. And then there will be a second hour where students can still stick around and ask questions and answer questions and work together, maybe start working on the next week's homework. A lot of these homeworks aren't going to be that collaborative, because a lot of it is just reading and listening to podcasts and different things, reading journals, reading things about inventors or companies that they founded. And so, but we'll have a second hour. Every week, students will be expected to hand in portions of a problem solution journal. And so each day I want the students to be looking for problems that are going on around them, things that they encounter every day. Maybe something that I was just thinking of a few weeks ago when I was putting week one's course together, we were somewhere with my family. And my son, I have a 2.5-year-old son that has figured out how to unlock himself when he's in his stroller. So when we're walking down the street, he unlocks himself out of the stroller, slips out, and starts getting down. And that was a problem. And so I started thinking, what's a solution? And so maybe that day when I was pushing him in the stroller, my problem solution journal would just detail the problem. My son can unlock himself from he can undo the clasps in his stroller. What's a solution? I could come up with a lock for it. I could have some sort of rubber covering. I could do this. And so that would be my problem solution entry for the day. And so each day students will be expected, not required, to write a problem that they saw and a possible solution. And the point of this is to start thinking creatively, thinking critically, thinking outside of the box about things that are going on around us. A lot of inventions are things just that, everyday problems. I worked with a guy named Josh Malone who founded a company, maybe you've heard of Bunch of Balloons. It's the balloons that you can hook up to a faucet and you fill 20-something water balloons at one time. And his invention process, his kids said, "Dad, we want to have a water balloon fight." And so he went in and started filling balloons one by one by one. And 40 minutes later, when he had enough balloons for a water balloon fight, his kids were no longer interested. And so he thought there's got to be a better way. Eventually came to this solution, and it turned him into a multi-millionaire. And it's one of the most awarded summer toys ever, because he can fill up 20-something water balloons in 20 seconds. And it's just, So we'll be thinking about those things. What are everyday problems that we encounter each day? What's a solution for it? And then at the end of this course, I'll go through sort of the weekly topics, but at the end of the course, we'll start picking our top 2 or 3 inventions or solutions to problems that we've encountered. And I'm going to teach the students how to do a patentability search. So how to decide whether or not, at least the preliminary step, how to decide whether your invention is something that no one has ever thought of before and you could get a patent on it. And then we'll start talking about some of the patent laws, requirements for patents, and I'll teach students how to write some of the basic portions of a patent application. We won't go through the whole process of writing the whole application or even applying for the patent, I guess, unless there's something that is really outstanding, which there could very well be. But that's the part of the course that we'll be working on through the whole year, is this problem solution journal. How can we see the problems around us? What are the possible solutions? Our weekly topics, I'll just pull this up. So week 1 is inventing with purpose, stewardship over our fellow humans. Week 2 will focus more on the problem solution technique and learning through failure. I'll introduce some note-taking techniques as we listen to podcasts, as we read books, journals, all sorts of different things that we'll be working on. How can you take notes that will be meaningful so that if you read these things again 5 years down the road, it will refresh your memory enough that you can remember what you read. So you don't have to reread everything. We'll have a week where we do a very high level, very basic introduction to patent law, because patents are something that we'll encounter throughout the whole course as we talk about these different inventors. And so I want to give a little bit more of a foundation so that as we talk about patents and intellectual property and those things, we have that foundation to build on as we discuss with people. And then I also, in the very beginning, we're going to talk about teen inventors, the inventor of the trampoline, of Braille, earmuffs, the inventor of bubble gum was a teenager. And so in doing that, I'd like to focus on our teens, our youth, our students have the capability to come up with these great inventions now. We don't have to wait until we're done with college to start, coming up with these creative solutions and things. We could invent the next trampoline or the next bubble gum as a teenager. And then we'll have a book discussion. So during some of the weeks, our homeworks will be read in your book from this chapter, and we won't be talking about those until we have a book discussion. Our first book discussion is The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. That's Kamkwamba. I can't remember his first name. William Kamkwamba. And he was a boy in Africa that found a book about electricity and then built a homemade windmill. It's really an inspiring book for me. And all of the first 6 weeks are really setting the foundation for the rest of the course of we can do these things and we can find the resources to do them, and just be inspired. And then we'll go through different things like making electricity useful. We'll focus on the light bulb for a couple of weeks and the patent battles that happened, alternating current. One thing I would like to highlight too, and it was up here, for those of you following the Well-Educated Heart rotation, where it's applicable or practical, that's the right word. I try and include a week where we'll focus on that month's rotation topic. So in week 4 in September, we'll talk about the stars and technologies and inventions and innovators that help us understand the stars better. And then in November it's part of the Well-Educated Heart Mothers University. So not necessarily something that our scholars and students will be focusing on, but it might be fun for the mothers who are focusing on music instruments to talk to their students about. Adolf Rickenbacker is the inventor of the electric guitar. We'll focus on him. And Bartolomeo Cristofori invented the piano. And so we'll be talking about the problems and adversity that they encountered as they invented an electric guitar or piano. We'll have the telegraph, the telephone, and as part of the telephone, we'll be talking about Alexander Graham Bell. We'll be reading a book about his life. He's a fascinating person, a wonderful person, and unfortunately, he had people in his life that were record keepers because he certainly wasn't, and we wouldn't know about a lot of his inventions and a lot of the good that he did. But for other people in his life that kept track of those things and kept going. We'll have a couple of weeks where we'll focus on women in innovation, talk about Marie Curie, Rosalind Franklin. She's the person that found DNA and first found the structure of DNA. Ada Lovelace and Grace Hopper were the first computer scientists. Ada Lovelace may have been the first computer programmer. Hedy Lamarr was an actress, and she is the founder of, or the inventor of Bluetooth communication. We'll talk about photography. We'll have a week where we'll focus in February for Black History Month. We'll focus on a few Black inventors, and that's also a rotation topic for April. So the students will be able to help your homeschool classrooms there. We'll have other book discussions. If you want to find more, if you want to look through this some more without me just walking through every step, this is available on the Mighty Networks app. But that's the overview of the course. Again, the goal is to teach problem solution techniques, to learn from these historic inventors of how we can solve the everyday problems in our own lives, come up with solutions for them, and just learn and grow and improve ourselves. One other fun thing, and a few of the students have already taken advantage of this, if you sign up for my class, you can have a free t-shirt. All of the students so far have selected this option. That's a t-shirt that they can walk around that says, "I invent things," has the Well-Educated Heart logo on it. But that is the overview of my course. I think it's going to be a fun and a wonderful year. I'm really excited. I love learning about inventors. I love innovation. I love technology. And it's so fun to talk about them and learn. I think there's still a few minutes left. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd like to answer any questions that you might have, or any clarification on information I've shared.
I have a question.
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to look through your Mighty Networks stuff that you've put together, but do you have a book list so we can just make sure we get everything ordered before you get started?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'll share my screen again, and I can show you where, at least on my page, where you can find that. So I think everyone's page would look something similar to this. When you get here, if you just scroll to the bottom of this checklist, the book list for my class is here. I've tried to include the ISBN numbers so you can make sure that you're getting the right version. The author, and some of the classes are available on Audible. Oftentimes that's my preferred method of consuming books. And so The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind is available on Audible, and it's narrated by Corey Jackson. He has an authentic African accent, and I just loved listening to him talk. And then another book, Alexander Graham Bell. This was written by his grandson. One of these is his grandson. It's available for free on Audible if you have an account. But the book is fascinating. And then The Wright Brothers by David McCullough. And then this last one, They Made America, is a book full of smaller stories. And let me just grab my copy real quick. Mine looks like this. And it's just a book that has 5 or 6 pages of text like this about different inventors and and the technologies that they worked on. I use the hardcover version. I know that there's a paperback version. I'm not sure if they're the exact same or not. They have a different number of pages, which could just be, you know, one is large and one is small, and so it has more pages. I'm not sure. There are select portions that are available on Audible, but it doesn't cover all of the inventors and topics that we'll be discussing in class. So I don't recommend using Audible for that one, but there's just 4 books. They can all be found used and in good condition on Amazon for a few dollars a piece. They Made America might be a little bit more, just because I'm not sure how easy it is to get the used version, but I think even brand new, this was $30, 20 something maybe. But good question. Oh, there's the chat. A syllabus and or book list. Okay, yeah. So there was the book list. The syllabus, I don't have a syllabus, and maybe I could create one on top of the overview or the weekly topics, just to sort of dictate what will be expected each week. But that's as we move from week to week. Like at the end of week 1's class, I'll introduce all of the homework for week 2 and then open it up so that you can have all of the links and all of the resources for week 2. And my plan is to just open those things as soon as week 1 class ends. Week 2 is available, but if I guess there is an appetite to move a week ahead of time, we can just talk about that in the class. And I could maybe start opening them up earlier if needed. Sounds like we're fun. Yes.
If the students have a hard time getting through everything for the week, will that be a big problem, or can they just continue participating?
I think that will be up to the student. I will try and have everything be something that can be accomplished in 3 or 4 hours. I think with some things that there'll be YouTube links, like week 1 has a few YouTube links that are TED Talks. And then it has, I think, 45-minute podcast episodes. And so those things should be able to get through. I think maybe the difficulty will be when we have more reading. But I don't think, I mean, I'm catering a lot of the homeworks. I have a son that is 12, almost 13, who will be in the class. And I think of him as I am creating the homework. So I hope that people won't fall behind. I don't think that we'll move so fast. And if it turns out that we're moving too fast for a lot of the group, then I think we'll just slow things down, assign less homework. I think it's more important to have a good experience than to really get through all sorts of content. Because I mean, even with this smaller amount of content, we can have really wonderful discussions that can be uplifting and inspiring. We'll just see how it goes, I think. And definitely as we're in the course, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or concerns, or if we're moving too fast or too slow. I welcome all of that feedback so we can make this the best experience for everybody that we can. I mean, within reason. Gunner, the Prince of Awesomeness. I love that. My son's 13. Cool. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you for your time. Thank you for the questions. Like I said, this will be recorded if you want to go back and review any of the information. Dr. Pablo and his family, I think, will be disseminating the recording of this, so you can watch it, or please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm on Mighty Networks. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of there, and I try to respond as quickly as possible. So if you message me, I'll get back to you soon.